Hello, everyone. Happy whatever day of the week you're watching this. We're a little later in the week. Life happens sometimes, schedules conflict. But I have my guest Jade with me, who is taking some time out of her hectic schedule to join me. So, Jade, welcome. Thanks so much for taking some time to tell your story and share your journey with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on the pod and have a chat with you
Yeah.
about all things recruitment.
Definitely, definitely. It's actually been a long goal of mine to have someone from UK talk about recruiting, just because I'm curious to know some of the differences, which we'll get into. So you're my
No
first UK recruiter, so thanks so much for doing this. And
worries at
make it
all.
work. So, first question I always like to ask any recruiter I have in the hot seat is just to kind of talk about your journey because recruiting is one of those professions where everyone has a different path that led them into recruitment. So, what did that journey look like for you? What got you interested initially in recruiting, and now that you're in the thick of it, what do you love about it that keeps you motivated to stay in recruiting?
So I've actually had a lot of different jobs. I started off my career in a shoe shop, yeah, selling shoes to people, and then kind of transitioned into a supermarket through school, and then foreign exchange, and then I ended up in a banking role, which I settled in for about 3 years. Common denominator was I always was working face to face with people, and over the phone with people, which I loved. Um, I guess when I was in the banking sector, I really, really enjoyed that. I had a personal banking role, so it was very much a consultative approach with people. And times changed. Everything went a lot more technological, and everything was more phone based. So that kind of element of my job was lost. So I did feel like I had to move on because that was what I liked the most. So I'd always been interested in recruitment just due to the fact that it was very people orientated and I felt it really suited me, but I didn't really know how to get into it. And I moved over to the area I live in now and basically just took a jump and applied for a recruitment role that was a kind of a junior one,
Mm.
and absolutely harassed Pearson Whiffen for a job here. I think they got so sick of me. I was calling every few days for updates on applications and stuff. And yeah, they ended up giving in, gave me a job, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a massive, massive people person. I'm very, very sociable by nature. And I think the drive in me as well, I'm very ambitious, and I really thrive under pressure and in fast paced environments. So generally, I think recruitment just suits me to a T.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, I love working with different people day to day. I like the strategy of recruitment. You have an end goal, you work to the end goal. And I think that you can always continuously better yourself and you're always striving for more in recruitment, no matter what part and what level of recruitment you're at, which is something that I love because it just consistently keeps you motivated, I
Yeah.
would say is the best way to
Definitely.
describe.
Definitely, and perfect segue to the next question because you mentioned how much you are a people person, and that's kind of the primary goal of the recruitment industry is create those positive candidate experiences, get to know the people that you're working with, and get an understanding of what they're looking for, so you can make sure that you're guiding them to the right position as their next step. So, what are some of the things that you try to do to check those boxes when you're going through the initial conversation with any candidate to make sure that not only is the role itself going to be the right one for them, but that they're going to be the right fit for the company that you're representing too.
I think obviously when I speak to clients, I really establish not only the experience expectations for candidates, but also the culture.
Mhm.
What sort of personality type suits well? Is there a particular personality they feel that they're missing in the office space or within the team? And then obviously that translates into the conversations I have later with candidates.
Mhm.
Um, in conversation with candidate, I would say there's kind of four main points that I will go into detail about to determine kind of exactly what they're looking for. So location and style of working is obviously really important. If I have a candidate that ticks every box in terms of experience, but they've got a young family at home, for example, they really need flexible working, and this role only offers 5 days in office. It's not going to be work. It's not going to work, and it's not going to be right for either or. Also, the industry, I think it's really important. A lot of people are looking to move out of an industry, but I think it's important to look at similar industries, or where is your most valuable knowledge based industry wise, because when you're determining salaries when you're making a move, I think it's really beneficial to look at your kind of key knowledge assets and where that can be applied in a new industry to allow yourself the best possible base salary if you're changing. But also, obviously, if you're interested in the same industry, then it's really important to know that, so you're not going to put something in front of somebody that they're not interested in.
Yeah.
Um, Pay is super, super important within sales. For me, I could have a business development manager that's in an entry level role, potentially at like 26K, but then I'm also running business development manager roles at 75K. So it's really dependent on the spec in terms of what's expected with the candidate.
Yeah.
But job titles only sometimes can be a bit misleading. Not
Yeah.
everybody that's a business development manager does the same or has the same responsibilities.
Mhm.
We're in a bit of a cost of living crisis over here at the moment. So it's important that everybody is at the correct salary for them and is valued for the input and what they can bring to a new company. So pay is a really, really important indicator for candidates and for clients as to when I'm recruiting for them. And then I'd also say it's really important to determine kind of external bugbears or other things that have really been an issue or an uncomfortable subject for people with previous employers. I
Right.
think some people struggle a little bit, to be honest, sometimes about things they really don't like in the workplace or things that they find uncomfortable. To find them a role that's going to fit them entirely, it's really important to get to the bottom of even the smallest things that are going to actually be important to them as an individual.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that brings up a good point in terms of branding them, because you have to make sure that you're creating this candidate experience while at the same time, you're one of hundreds, thousands of recruiters like I am.
Yeah,
How can we set
yeah.
ourselves apart and do that? So what role does branding play in terms of that candidate experience? How often are you utilizing company messaging while at the same time, trying to create your own personality through recruitment and being aware that you're representing a client as well as part of all of this?
I think the perfect way to explain is through Pearson Whiffen Recruitment's ethos, which is professional with personality. When you join this company, whether that's with recruitment experience or without, what they do is they'll teach you and give you the tools for recruitment, but they encourage you to push your own personality forward and be yourself when you're dealing with candidates and clients. There are, a lot of people out there that probably wouldn't prefer my approach. I'm very heavy on LinkedIn and I push a lot on social media. It's not a favourite approach by all, but it works incredibly well for me. And Pearson Whiffen have been extremely supportive of that approach, and it's allowed me to build really, really fantastic relationships with both candidates and clients. So I think it's really important for your branding to completely be yourself and be within a business that allows you to remain professional and provide a fantastic service, but also to let your own personality and individuality shine through, because ultimately, especially in sales, people buy from people. And there are a lot of people, I think, that will relate to me, as many people wouldn't, that many people would. And those connections, when you're authentically yourself, are so much stronger and will last for the longevity. So it's super important to maintain a personal brand, but also, carry your company's brand in high stead along with you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's obviously one of the reasons you and I are talking now, because I recruit in a similar style that you do. So that's
Mm-hmm.
always obviously going to appeal to people with like-minded approaches. And
Yeah,
I'm going to bounce around on the questions I sent you just because I think these two kind of go hand in hand in terms of
yeah,
what we're talking about in terms of branding, but also networking. Obviously, networking is a key component of being in a recruitment position. And I think at
yeah.
times can be the most overwhelming to some people who are either new in the industry or, from the job seeker's perspective, you always tell candidates that networking is important for them too. And big question we get, right, is, well, where do I start? So where did you start with that? Because you have a pretty impressive network and you've built this brand for yourself. So Now, what were some of the strategies that you approached early on to be strategic and build a network that's now collaborative with you?
I think a strategy that I started from very early on was the recognition of a face or a picture in accordance to a brand. So for me, I wanted my face to be recognizable when you think of Pearson Whitfin or sales recruitment. I wanted me as a person, people potentially not remembering my name. However, say there was a role that came up or there was a company and they required sales support, they were like, oh, what about that blonde girl on LinkedIn? Do you remember her?
Mhm.
And although it seems potentially a bit vain to others that I do post a lot of social media pictures of myself, but it's always so that people will remember what I look like and associate me with sales recruitment, and hopefully that will return well. And I think that a lot of people face the hurdle of worrying about the opposite side of opinion on doing those sorts of posts. That's
Mhm.
how I grew my network. There was a lot of trolling, especially early on for me. But I think if you get your head over the get your head around the fact that not everybody's going to like you, not everybody's going to agree with you, it's so easy to just move on from it and just be confident in the strategy that you've got. If it works for you, go for it and do it. Do whatever works for you individually.
Yeah.
And people fail every single day. People start new businesses, new strategies, and they fail. But as long as you get back up and go again, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think that's the main thing people need to remember when they're new to networking.
Mhm.
Try different methods out, figure out what feels most comfortable for you and what works for you. And even if it is daunting, give it a go, because if you fail, you never know, next time it might work, or there's going to be another avenue that does work even better for you. I think being slightly fearless and not worrying about what other people think is the best mindset to have, and the best strategy just to continue through your whole process of building a network for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, wanted to bounce back. You talked about your career progression, how you moved and eventually got into
Yeah.
recruitment. And I think that, as recruiters, that's probably some of the discussions that we have with candidates all the time, right? Tell me about yourself. What are your goals? What are you prioritizing in this job search? So, for someone who's been on both sides of the table as the job seeker and now as the recruiter, how do you think back to, what you prioritize during your search to make sure that you're getting those same points across to your candidates and creating that experience? What did you try to prioritize in your search that you found beneficial that other people can maybe look to in themselves?
I think it's making sure, number one, I always prioritized making sure that if I ever applied for a role or I reached out to a company, that my CV was clear, concise, and relatable to them as a business.
Mhm.
I don't really, and I don't know if it's different in the US, but we don't really ever require cover letters. And I don't think I think a lot of people believe that you need a cover letter, but I think some companies now, especially the job market is booming again in the UK, and people are going to go through sometimes hundreds if not thousands of applications. It needs to be direct to the point.
Yeah.
I always say to people, facts and figures are always good, but also make it a bit personal, make yourself stand out a little bit.
Mhm.
You don't want to read something and that could have been anybody. Try and make yourself a little bit different to somebody else. Yeah, I'd say that's what I did in my search, and also being really realistic with where you're applying. If it's a role that has absolutely nothing to do with your experience, applying direct, you're probably not going to get anywhere. If you are super, super passionate about getting into a new industry and your CV doesn't reflect what they want, I would always advise taking another avenue, whether that be if it's working in a particular shop, go in face to face and give them a feel of what you're like as a person and what you can bring, because that will always sell better than what's on paper. Or alternatively, phone direct, phone the company. Could I please speak to them? Don't just rely on a CV if your CV isn't going to tally up to what they're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, cover letters are probably the same in the US as
Oh,
there.
really?
And there's people that love them, people that are like, these are pointless. My
Yeah.
guidelines usually like you said, if you're trying to get into a new industry, if you're really passionate about a specific company, I think that's a good time for a cover letter. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's probably not going to be necessary in most instances on our
Yeah.
too.
No, I
So
totally agree. It's the same here.
yeah, for sure. So next few questions are kind of focused around communication, and you mentioned that was kind of the key aspect of the success you found, and obviously that's going to be really important when it comes to candidate experience and in your instance, client experience too. And that's definitely a strong two-way street. So going from like the client perspective and how you reach out to potential companies that you're going to support with recruitment efforts, what's typically your mindset there? Because, you know, people, the agency recruitment teams can sometimes get a bad rap in terms of the communication and constantly reaching out. So how do you try to be cognizant of that and, you know, maintain consistent touch points with the clients and make sure that they're understanding that you're there to support them through that.
I think it's really important to build a really great relationship with your clients to get an understanding of what works best for them, what their
Mhm.
lifestyle looks like day to day, week to week.
Yeah.
I have clients that will happily touch base with me daily. I have other clients who are so hectic and so manic day to day. I'll touch base once a week. I won't pester them between certain times, but that's because I know them so well that I
Mhm.
know exactly when is the right time. There are certain clients that do get agitated when you chase for feedback, for example, but others that don't mind that extra push because they will forget about things and they need you to chase them. So I
Mhm.
think it's really important in order to manage it correctly to have that really strong relationship to begin with.
Yeah.
And I think honesty is also something that comes along with really strong relationships, being able to have conversations with your clients. If they are giving feedback, for example, too late, it's sometimes 2 weeks, for
Mhm.
example, and saying, look, you're actually going to affect the hiring of the best candidate possible
Yeah.
if this is the lead time, and if this is how long you're going to take to get back to me. But meeting them halfway, how can we battle this together? Is there anything I can do to support you further? Can I take a bit of the heat off of you? Is there another step that I can do for you?
Yeah.
So to continue to support, but be honest throughout, and yeah, know them down to a T, and that will help you all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to go to the client side, I'm really interested to get or sorry, the candidate side of things. I'm really interested to get your perspective here since you work, you know, mainly within sales and sales candidates obviously are used to giving and receiving quick feedback. That's kind of the nature of the business that they're usually
Yeah.
in is, you know, we need an answer on this end of day. So, you know, sometimes there's that approach too. How do you try to find that balance with them? You know, obviously you don't want to continue to say, "Oh, I don't have an update yet," or you know, you don't want to put the onus on the client and say, "I just haven't heard
Yeah.
back from them." Not a good look for anyone. So, how do you try to approach that and keep the candidates that you're working with satisfied?
I think I try and keep everything positive. You
Mhm.
always keep everything positive, very upbeat, very optimistic. You don't ever want to give anybody the impression that waiting more time than usual means a no, because that is not always the case.
Right.
And I always try and make sure that the client is as relatable as possible.
Mhm.
Ultimately, a sales director is a human being, the same as we are. And I have no doubt 9 times out of 10, they're being pulled pillar to post day to
Mhm.
day.
Yeah.
They've got other deadlines to be managing, and sometimes recruitment does just come to the bottom of the list, and that's okay.
Mhm.
And I think it's making sure the candidates understand that in a list of importance, in a sales director's role or a decision maker's role, sometimes we're a little bit lower.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that they're not aware. It just means that they're a little bit busy, but they will get back to us because I always clarify there will be feedback and they will get back to us.
Yeah.
Just bear with me. They are super, super busy. And I'm very, very lucky, actually. I would say 99% of people are super understanding of that, especially in sales. They know how high pressured it
Yeah.
can be and, how fast paced it is. So a lot of the time, well, majority of the time, people are super understanding, which is a
Mhm.
relief. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned feedback a couple of times now, and this is kind of one of those polarizing things that we see. If you're active on LinkedIn, you know that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of one of the hot button issues around recruitment is, you know, getting feedback, being able to take any lessons that you might get from the interviews that you've been a part of. So how do you try to approach that? Because, you know, there's not always going to be feedback that is constructive, right? Sometimes you check 10 boxes, someone else checked those 10 boxes too, and they had an 11th box that the hiring manager didn't even know that they wanted until they talked to them. So how do you try to be encouraging with the feedback that you're getting and making sure it's constructive and going to allow them to grow as they go through the interview processes?
I think the best way to do it, if you're having to give some constructive criticism, is, I like to say, structure it like a sandwich. So, positive, then have the negative constructive side, and then a positive to finish.
Mhm.
I think it's always good to keep it lighthearted, especially if you're giving feedback in the way of a rejection. I
Yeah.
think it's super important to uplift people when they're in a situation where they have been rejected from a job. It's really important to make sure that they feel optimistic about new roles in the future,
Mhm.
and that this is kind of a stepping stone. One door closes, another door opens. That sort of mindset, I think it's really important to
Yeah.
maintain that all the way through a rejection call. And I think, yeah, it's really important as well to call candidates. If it's a CV being sent, 9 times out of 10, people are fine with me emailing just saying the CV hasn't gone through to interview process,
Yeah.
with a short explanation. But if it's actually at interview stage, I always like to call, because especially if it's a rejection, I do like to make sure they're okay,
Mhm.
and, give them some positivities. I like to talk to them about next steps, how we're going to move on from this together, because it is a partnership. It's not a, as much as people say recruitment is transactional, I don't believe it is. So, I like to support them if they're rejected to the next phase in their job search. But also, yeah, keep it positive and help them with anything I can via phone call. I just think it feels a lot more personal to the candidate as well.
Definitely. Definitely. So last question I have for you, Jade, is kind of the advice question. So, when people are coming to you, and obviously you work with a lot of different candidates, so you're
Yeah.
in a position to give that advice frequently. So I usually try to either pose it as job seekers in general or people that are entering the recruitment industry. When you were starting out in recruitment, was there a piece of advice that you received that you've kind of held on to that you would give to others who are looking to start their own career path in recruitment?
I would say the best piece of advice I got was to listen to everybody around me. I think I still do that now. Listen to people that are where you want to be in recruitment. So, the top billers in the company, listen to their approach, listen to what they do, listen to how they manage candidates, listen to how they manage clients, and just soak in as much as you can. I think, in this work from home and work in office debate, I would not have changed working 5 days a week in office for the world, because I learned so much every single day when I was new to recruitment, purely from watching everybody else around me. And
Mhm.
I think that you can always consistently pick up new things. There'll be terminology that I've never used before, and I hear someone say it, and I think that sounds brilliant. I'm going to use that. And that's just purely from listening.
Yeah.
I would also say, don't give up. Recruitment is not plain sailing, so don't expect to be up all the time.
Mhm.
If you go down, it doesn't mean you're a bad recruiter. It's just a bit of a rubbish patch, and that is
Yeah.
fine. Every single recruiter goes through it. Even the best billers in the world go through that.
Yeah.
And I would also say, don't be too hard on yourself if things are going bad. Because everybody makes mistakes, everybody learns at different paces. I mean, I'm 2 years in and still consistently learning. My manager's 13 years in the game, and he says to me, I'm still learning every day. So don't be
Yeah.
too hard on yourself. But I would also say the most important thing is to stay humble. Always stay humble, because you never know what position you yourself are going to be in. And I think that if you're kind to people and you're humble, it will always return in your favor.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, Jade, I appreciate you taking some time today to join me and discuss your career path. I appreciate the perspective of both sales recruitment and UK recruiting as well. So, if you're not connected with Jade, make sure you're doing that and follow along on her journey. Otherwise, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We will see you next week.
Thank you so much.